Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Qarawiyyin podcast. This is your host, Sarah. And first of all, Eid Mubarak to everybody. Today it's now the third day of Eid. You might be listening to this a bit later, but we wanted to wish everyone a happy Eid Mubarak, and we hope that you had a very fruitful first 10 days of the Hijjah. May Allah also accept Hajj from all of the people who were able to perform Hajj this year. And I'm joined today by my three co-hosts. I'm with Amina, Aisha A, and Aisha H. And how are you guys all doing?
Assalamu alaikum. Very well.
Alhamdulillah.
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 Not too bad.
Good. Good, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so today we're also doing kind of a more chilled out episode as far as TQP episodes go. But we wanted to just talk about something that we ourselves talk to each other about a lot, which is media, film, books, storytelling, and kind of like have a general conversation about like what, you know, makes for good storytelling and for good media, what makes for bad media, maybe like the subjective versus objective parts of that, how we approach it as Muslims. But yeah, we're talking about, you know, the things that we like to watch and read, and what we gain from them, what we, you know, would like to see from media. But I also just want to start by asking you guys what it is that, you know, you really look for and what you really like when it comes to storytelling. Like, what is it that you like to watch or read? What are the things that stand out to you?
Okay, so I haven't actually watched much TV in like the last 5 years, probably, but I read a lot of books, so my observations might be a bit outdated. But you know, I'm a very simple person. I just like happy endings. Aww. You know, I like heroic tales of action and adventure. You know, the struggle, the ambition. And, you know, I've grown up around brothers, so I didn't get to watch, like, the period dramas and the chick flicks for, like, you know, until I was, like, 16. So I was missing out on a lot. And, you know, we just watched, like, Rocky and Die Hard, like, every day. But, you know, it's... Yeah, I know, it's the worst. But the thing is, the best thing about it is they have meaningful characters that you follow through the film. And that investment is something that I love so much because, you really get into it. And, you know, when you study things like Lives of the Prophets and, you know, just like really brilliant Muslims that came afterwards with like, you know, their accomplishments and their struggles, it's like it's really hard to then go watch some like really plotless horror film with no like substance after that. That's why, you know, you need these. No offense to anyone here, but you know, I love that emotional connection that you can form, and that's why I like, you know, the heroic tales, and that's the good stuff.
See, I only have one brother, and he was not in charge of the remote when I was watching, so we did not watch Die Hard or Rocky. Very much a peer drama, chick flick kind of girl, always going for that happy ending endorphin high, but also like for me, it's like, okay, it's similar in a way in that I love those really good character development arcs. Like these guys or characters who go from like being a really horrible, conflicted mess of a person, and then they like go through stuff, and then you're like, oh my gosh, you've grown up so well, like good for you, you've made good choices now. Like Avatar fans will know Zuko, best character story arc ever. But yeah, it's definitely one of my faves.
It's interesting. I feel like we've all kind of got a bit of a different focus, but a bit similar as well. I mean, I feel like growing up, probably my defining thing that attracted me to different series, be they books or films, was the fantasy element and that genre. I do consider myself 100% the Harry Potter generation, and things that were similar to that, and definitely as well kind of coming off of the back of Lord of the Rings, the release of the films in the early 2000s. I'd say that's probably a lot of what I spent my time thinking about and invested in and following up on. That is, yes, my childhood. But I feel like as I've got older, probably as well due to the influence of people around me, I think, Aisha, you've definitely influenced me in terms of appreciating character growth. I like the kind of biopics now, or just looking generally at characters in different series or films and seeing them, as you said, like, you know, just grow up. But I think overall, it's being transported to a different reality. That's what media for me is about. It is that temporary escape from all of the problems and the troubles in the world, and imagining something completely different, and just, you know, exciting and adventurous stories like Amina was saying as well. I do like the historical dramas. I'm the period drama kind of person now as well. And I like tropes. And I was reading an interesting article recently about how tropes are tropes for a reason, because they do actually work and they are popular and they are super satisfying. And I think sometimes you just need to be a bit more open about that. But I think as well, and I know it's something that inshallah we wanted to discuss today, I feel like any kind of media, be it books that you're reading or movies that you're watching, they also show you not just, completely different worlds, but even in this world, different cultural contexts, different realities, different experiences that people go through. And I think that I really liked kind of the subtle social commentary in a lot of things that, whether it's foreign cinema or things about different periods in history, and kind of being able to draw that out of different material. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm thinking now about like what was it that I grew up watching with my family, and like how does it influence like what I like today? And it was a lot of like, if we put on a family movie, it was usually like martial arts or like Die Hard, Glory, The Patriot, like all these movies that I guess my dad and my brothers were picking out, which they were good, but I don't know. I think also because I don't watch as much film, and I usually look to film as more of like pure, like source of pure entertainment in terms of like production value. That's right. I want like the writing to be really good. Like it's worse for me to like, even if something is like well produced, if the lines are really bad, it ruins the movie for me. Like if it's just like weird, or it's like why are they having a monologue? Yeah. Like, people don't talk like this. Or okay, now there's this like more recent trend, I don't know if you guys have noticed in movies, where like they try to make it like realistic dialogue. So people have like really weirdly casual conversations that are like, it seems very unscripted. They stutter. They just say like random casual stuff that nobody wants to watch on screen. Yeah. I remember watching some like Netflix movie that was like this, and I was like, this is horrific. Like it was so horribly written, and like the plot was lost in it because they were trying so hard to do this like edgy new dialogue style. But yeah, in terms of film, like just like high production value, and like yes, definitely good character development, and I think I like seeing like different types of relationships. Like Aisha will know, like when we talk about shows and everything, the ones that I like are the ones that depict like certain relationships really well. Like like instead of, not that there's anything bad with like that main, stereotypical like romantic relationship, but when they show relationships between like kids and their parents, or an unrelated like young person with an older person, whether it's like a teacher or a mentor or something, like I love those. Like they're so interesting. But yeah, in terms of books especially, but I do enjoy seeing this in film, I just like anything that has like really intense moral dilemmas, and things that like make you wonder like, oh my god, if this happens in real life, like I'm screwed. Like things like that. Like I don't like, that's why I love sci-fi too, because it's a lot of like moral dilemmas. It's a lot of like questioning kind of like our moral frameworks, things that like could happen in the future or are starting to happen. How would we actually deal with it? And yeah, I think I'm not like, I don't want to make it seem like I'm such an intellectual person. Like I prefer books to movies, not because like I spend so much time reading or anything, but like I need a story to be really long in order to like really get immersed into it. So that's why I love like 1,000-page books, because you're following them for like decades, and you actually get to see like, the whole span of like their story, and like that's like true character development. It's like, okay, what are they like 20 years from now?
Oh my gosh, the patience you have.
That's why I love The Count of Monte Cristo, because that's like the peak of, like character transformation, I think, is The Count of Monte Cristo. Or I don't know. I just love like long stories, like moral dilemmas. One thing, last thing I'll mention is that I really don't like horror films, but I recently started reading like more gothic novels, which like are not just like pure horror and like, like just a scary story, but like have elements of that, and I think they're really good. Like I don't know, there's just something about like reading it where it's like, okay, it's not as scary as like jump scares, but it's just freaky enough that like you read it before bed and you're like, oh my god, like, you gotta like do extra dhikr tonight, like that type of stuff. Yeah. The ones I'm thinking of, at least in terms of like gothic novels, are The Monk by Matthew Lewis, which is like, that's the thing, that has like the most incredible like moral, I don't know how to say, like that's what the motif of the story is like this guy's own morality, and like just like how it kind of like deteriorates over time, but it also has those gothic elements, and like some satanic stuff, but it's from like a Christian perspective, so it's not celebrating the satanic stuff. But also that, and I recently read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which was like, it's so beautifully written. Like it became such a well-known story that I didn't actually know what it was about, if that makes sense. Like I know the monster and that's it, but the book itself is really good.
See,
and it's a little bit scary. It's not too scary. Yeah.
I feel you there on the beautiful writing. I think when it comes to written media, I definitely go for, well, recently for some reason, like a thriller / crime mystery things, because I think they're just easy to get through. It's one story, there's going to be a resolution at the end, otherwise they won't sell, those kind of stories. But I also, the thing that I don't get from those is really beautiful writing. I think that is what I love. Like I used to, so when I was like, when you start reading serious books when you're like 13, 14 or whatever, and you get older, it's just like I used to sit there with a little notepad and write down all the words I didn't know the meanings of, and it would be filled because, clearly my vocabulary needed a lot of work. But, and then there are other books and you're just like, oh my gosh, not because I'm like such a great writer, but I could have written this and I don't write very well. So like, and those are really frustrating to read because you're like, you had such promise and it's so irritating because you write like a 5th grader and it's just... So there are some books I love because of the writing, but the story is horrible. And there are other books that you love because the characters are amazing, but,
Yeah, I think that's a good thing about movies that are based on books, actually, is that they include a lot of, like, really well-written lines. Like, like, Lord of the Rings does have, like, Gandalf's, like, whatever, like, his like, dramatic advice.
Pretending
like,
Sada, when you haven't seen the films yet.
You haven't seen it.
Wait. Okay, this is a myth. I read the first book.
Yeah, but you haven't seen it. So how do you know what Gandalf says?
I have seen the movies. Okay, no, here's the thing, too, is that, like, I have really... like mismatched memories in my head. I remember seeing the one where like the spiders, like,
okay,
the spiders, like, that. And I'm pretty sure I've seen the like previous ones
That's
too.
That's the best movie though.
Okay,
all right.
Yeah. See,
all right, we forgive you. Carry on.
Yeah. Okay.
We let you off there.
At the very, I haven't seen the complete thing, but I remember that like the style of dialogue it's closely related to the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Just more understandable.
And the book is so like well written, and it does have those like, I know I was just criticizing like monologues in movies, but if it's like an old wizard doing it, you're like, this is great. Like it makes sense, Yeah.
No, definitely. I always have a lot more faith in things that are written and then adapted for the screen rather than just screenplay. Because like you said, there's backstories that even if they're not included, you kind of get an inkling of, or you as somebody who's read the books feels a little bit more in the know, and so you take more pleasure out of seeing that being depicted on screen. But in general, I do feel as well that, as you guys are saying, with reading, it's better because the high lasts longer. Like you're saying, when you've got a really long book with a film, especially these days with most films being like 90 minutes, it's over and done with, and then it's like, that's it. But with reading, it takes a much longer time, and then you can reread it again. And it's just, I feel like it settles in your soul so much more deeply. And definitely what you were saying, just Sana, about scary books. I think it's really interesting because first off, like, obviously the horror genre is scary, but it's, scary stories and ghost stories were around before they started being obviously adapted onto the screen, obviously. And even like for us as Muslims, always, whether it's Eid or, it's gathering and telling jinn stories, which is just like, it's a family experience sometimes, or with friends, and
they're based on reality, so,
But I know that there was a book that I was reading recently. It was a collection of ghost stories by M.R. James, and I was reading it out loud with my family, and I got so scared. I was literally like, "This is so scary." I had to stop reading. Like, it's amazing the power that the imagination wields. That even when literally, you're not just reading it to yourself and it's like going on in your head, but you're saying it out loud, you'd still be so scared that you'll be saying your du'as more fervently that night.
Yeah.
So no, I read Lolita recently, and that's one of those books that is written very beautifully, and it has that moral dilemma thing that you guys all talking about. The thing is, I've seen it, so I know exactly what it's about. But the book is just so much. It really, really blurs the lines of morality compared to the film, and the imagery you get, the imagery is way better from the book. Like the film just can't see it because it's got very sensitive topics. But I was actually reading and I had to stop because I'm like, whoa, who am I feeling sorry for here? This is not good. And that's how I knew it was a good book. Like I hate myself and I hate you, but this is a good book.
Oh, that's scary.
I'm recommending this to everyone.
I couldn't finish it.
It really was.
I couldn't finish it. It was so well written, but I was like, like it's incredibly written, but this is so like I just felt
Twisted.
disgusted. Yeah, no, it was so. Oh man, yeah. On that note, though, like speaking of just like purely good storytelling, why is it significant? Because I think I don't know. A lot of people might think that like okay, this is entertainment and storytelling is just kind of like an additional like it's up there with like idle talk or it's down there with idle talk. You know, like it's a way to pass the time, but it's not the best way to pass the time. But I would argue that it is, you know, pretty significant. It's important, and that it contains a ton of benefit. That it contains a lot of civilizational value, if I can say that. And yeah, I also want your guys' thoughts on that.
I think I should lead on this one because I mean, I'm just remembering in that Khilafa episode we did where she was like, she'd be a storyteller. What job in the Khilafa would you do? So I'm really curious to know your answer to this.
To be fair, my answer to this is less fun. It's more of the, you know, critical way about it. So, you know, the thing is, right, to understand storytelling isn't only for fiction. People tell stories even with, you know, in journalism and news and all that. And the way you get things out there is what people believe. And I think that's really, really important for us, especially as Muslims, but, you know, general people who are very much involved in, like political landscapes to understand, you know, the power of media in our lives and, you know, shaping our worldviews. And I recently read Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, who has like the best, you know, observations on this.
That's an amazing book.
It's the best. It really changed my life. And, you know, basically, so people always talk about media being a form of brainwashing or, you know, some sort of social engineering, you know, that, you know, but rather than going down the like Orwell route of, you know, restricting what information we have, he kind of said that we're going to be brainwashed by the things that we love, right? So this makes things that we watch so much more dangerous because, you know, things like, you know, your animes and your Lord of the Rings, all this they have like undertones and we need to know what they are. And basically what happens, it depends on what you value. And basically what he does is he says something that, you know, Orwell fears a world where people would ban books, but Huxley feared a world that books won't need to be banned. And this is because people don't see books as something that are of value. And basically by controlling the media that we have and how much value it has, it depends how we will look at the outside world. Basically, so now we have to look, our media is driven by personal interest, by things that bring money in, political and nationalist agendas. And this is where the lines blur and the narratives really matter, and we actually see the impact of media on society. And okay, so basically, right, so sorry, this is not very much fictional, but it's going to come into the fictional later. But basically, we have this idea of concealing and rewriting the truth. And this truth very much becomes fiction. And basically, you know, we have the very extreme, you know, burning down libraries like Julius Caesar and all that, but we have actual films and movies that will rewrite our historical narratives of things that are happening in the world right now. You know, things like whitewashing and pacifying crimes, like, you know, like the American Sniper, that it's a very white savior type film where, you know, you're sympathizing with a war veteran who, you know, rather than his victims. Or like very Orientalist films where, you know, the bad Muslims, you know, that helps justify things like the Middle East and, you know, intervention and, you know, in Afghanistan and all that. And I want to make a note of Kite because this is like a favourite film. This is all the bookstagrams. Everyone loves this film and this book. But this is a book and a film that people, Afghans especially, are very critical of, and not denying elements of truth. But, you know, it follows the same US savior trope and demonizes an entire group with, like, no nuance at all. But that's the thing. Fiction doesn't need nuance. That's the best thing about fiction. Fiction, you can just go ahead, you know, spout whatever nonsense you want and you can get away with it. It requires no justification. But the thing is, when this fiction is being promoted by the Bush family, you know, you kind of have to see what weight this work of fiction has. And inevitably, people will use these portrayals to shape their worldviews. And for some people, you know, it's not fiction anymore. It's superimposed onto the real life people and situations they know. Maybe even subconsciously. And like for them, it becomes the truth. So now we don't know what is fiction and non-fiction in that sense. And then for other people who aren't duped so easily, you know, things... Basically, we have so much information and so much media and so much, like... I'm going to say crap media, people, you know, things that is not very great, that kind of drowns the truth out. And now we have to kind of be in the situation that, you know, what is good media and what is not. But I think Neil Postman puts it really, really well when he says that, you know, we forget to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. We are very easily distracted. And that's what fiction is usually used for, you know, for, you know, escaping, the reality of the world and stuff like that. But this could be very sinister because, now the media has control of deciding what we think is important and what requires the attention of people. And, we have so many Netflix shows that are basically identical. They're based around the same American culture wars. And, tragedies are exploited and made into films straight away. And, TVs are something, we have more TV hosting services than before. TVs are so easy to, in everyone's houses, it doesn't take as much effort as reading a book. And when that is the case, storytelling and who tells the stories and how you go about it is so much more important because it does, kind of shape our worldview.
Mashallah, that's like super profound. I'm so glad you let it out.
I didn't want to start with that because I was going so well, but
But also, no, I think to add to your point, I think the thing about storytelling is it's so emotive, right? A good story is one that will bring out the emotions in the people, in the viewers, or, the readers, whoever's devouring that form of media. Right. And we saw this, we will get onto a lighter tone, I promise, but we saw this in, Trump's era of like that whole, where he rewrites the truth, the post-truth era, right? Where he really fed on people's anger and frustration and disillusionment with the government. And he used a lot of this emotive language and rhetoric to like drum up support and shape facts and whatever he wanted really into, his story, right? He rewrote reality to fit and suit his needs. And I really, really feel what you're saying, on just how powerful the media and storytelling is on that. I mean, and really on a smaller scale, right? Like I noticed this even with like children's shows, for example, where, when we were younger and we watched like shows on Disney Channel or whatever, the guy who stole or told a lie was obviously the bad guy. And then by the end of the 20-minute episode, he'd get in trouble. Nowadays, you watch it and it's just like, oh, but it's okay to tell this lie, or, and they make it really funny and it's like, it's a good thing. He should have lied because look, he got the prize at the end. Yeah, he cheated the other guy, but he got out, he got ahead. So, that's really a great thing. And like watching it as an adult, you're just like, oh my gosh, what subliminal messages are you feeding these children? Versus the kid who's sitting next to me watching it being like, oh my gosh, I want a puppy too. And you're just like, oh my gosh, no, not like this. But it can be really insidious.
I think there's that saying, isn't it, that of people who don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. And I think that obviously we see that on a day-to-day basis in the media, but I mean, I don't want to say kind of it's caused by storytelling, but I think there's a circular relationship. It happens in life and people do it in media as well, whether that's fantasy, whether that's fiction or non-fiction. And Amina, what you're saying about like the Kite Runner, I really, really agree. And honestly, I mean, I haven't read The Kite Runner, but I did read 1,000 Splendid Suns, which is the second one, which honestly, I mean, from what I've heard about The Kite Runner, it's bad. But in my view, 1,000 Splendid Suns is worse on the propaganda front purely because it's about women. And I read it and I remember feeling so sick to my stomach because the story is heartbreaking. And it's just, you feel like, how can, like you guys are saying, the power of writing, like, how can this be? But at the same time, I knew that the presentation of all of this was designed to elicit that reaction in me and actually, point to the fact that, look at the situation of Afghan women. This is why, they needed freedom. This is why the invasion was justified in some way, shape or form, because otherwise they would have to put up with this. The most barbaric of practices, the injustice and just the way in which, there was no course for help or hope in any of that story. It was honestly awful. And the only way I could get over it was taking out my hate on the author and just being like, how dare you write this piece of propaganda? But even like on a less kind of dramatic level, recently, like, a few years ago, I remember watching the Stephen Hawking biopic, The Theory of Everything. And, it's a really, like, nice, emotional tale, other than all of his rubbish about how the universe started and how God doesn't exist and all of that. Yeah. It was all very interesting and nice about how he got this debilitating illness and how he and his wife overcame this. And, then obviously there's a break in their relationship, but at the end it's like, oh, look, they got together and, they were honored together for, I can't remember, whatever it was. And I was like, oh, okay, so, as you do, you Wikipedia stuff as you're watching it. And the actual truth is very, very far from this extremely romanticized story of their relationship, where actually, he was, although his wife had supported him, the break in their relationship happened because he cheated on his wife, and they actually didn't speak for years and years. And she wrote a book then that was kind of based on this after coming to a reconciliation. But even then, it wasn't so positive as the film is making out. The film even changed the adaptation of the book, and she kind of signed off to it, kind of reluctantly in some ways as well. And I was just like, how can even this small story in the big scheme of things about this people's relationship be changed quite dramatically in many ways to be this really cute romance when actually it had a terrible ending and all of the kind of middle parts that were bad as well were removed because they didn't want the truth to get in the way of a good story. And I just think that it definitely should make us think about how, yes, fiction is affecting our values and our perceptions of the world around us, because if we don't know about some of these things, then, you know, we're going to miss the wood through the trees.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to mention, like, where do we draw that dividing line between fiction and nonfiction? Because even, okay, like what you're talking about, that movie, it's supposed to be based on a true story, right? But even fictional books that are based on, like, nothing, that are just made up stories, like the Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns, I don't know why, but I read those as a kid, so, like, I didn't get half of what was going on, but also, at the time, I just, like, read them, and I was like, oh my god, that's, like, this is so sad and, like, violent. Looking back, I'm like, whoa, like, there's so much in terms of just, like, the social commentary there, but people read those books and they're like, this gave me such an insight into XYZ society,
absolutely.
into XYZ culture, and like they literally talk about, they're like, this is how, you know, this opened my eyes to a different part of the world. It's like, dude, one American guy wrote these books, like, is like, that's it. But that's exactly how people consume those forms of media, is like as windows into different cultures and everything. So it does matter that, you know, people write decent stories that are, I know it gets, I don't know, I think so. Obviously, if you've read anything that's been like more recently published, you see like very overt attempts to just like insert diversity for its own sake, which like sometimes I'm like, okay, like it's fine to just like, you know, see different possibilities, even if it doesn't seem like it's connected to the plot, because also as a kid, what you like watch, what you read, what you consume, I think it does shape your imagination about what's possible in the world. I think this is why Muslims, not all, some Muslims have like really ridiculous marriage expectations, because like you grow up not interacting with the opposite gender, but you only learn about like relationships through movies and books, and you're like, this is what it's like, and it's not like that at all. Like, I think it is. No, I it's a problem. Let's say other people, like, they watch that stuff and they're like, it's a ridiculous romance, and then they go like actually have relationships and they're like, yeah, it's not like this, but Muslims are like, this is what it is. You know, like, so
this is why you only watch Die Hard. They don't have none of that romance stuff.
Yeah. No, but actually that's a problem. The thing about martial arts movies and just action in movies in general is that it like grossly exaggerates like people's own physical ability when it comes to like fighting. Like I was talking to my brother about this. Dude, no, like the average person cannot last like 20 seconds like in a fight. Like you get punched in the face, you don't just like get back up and like continue doing like yourself, I don't know, right? Flying. Dude, no. Listen, like that's the thing, is like getting punched in the face, you're out at least for a little bit. I don't know.
I love
like,
that's
why,
your
like,
take home from action movies. It grossly exaggerates the human body skill.
It does, dude. No, that's why people who like actually train and like do martial arts, they don't go around like being antagonistic and trying to get into fights, because they know it's very difficult to fight someone.
Get arrested.
I'm sure they want to.
No, people only watch stuff in movies. I'm always like, yeah, I'll fight you. Like I'm always ready, you know. Like,
that's true. I learned everything from like Karate Kid. I'd be screaming in real life.
Okay, there are two very distinct camps on this podcast right now, because me and Aisha Hage are just like shaking our heads like
no, but it's real, dude. No, it has like, I don't know, I think the point of me talking about this, about like how people overestimate their fighting abilities, is that people like they think about themselves and like the possibility, they imagine possibilities in the real world based on storytelling, based on media and fiction. So yeah, I think it is significant. It's not just weird commentary.
I think that's definitely true. And on that point, although in defense of it, I would say, of course, acknowledging the people who base their marriage expectations solely on fiction, you know, fantasy in particular has been shown to do wonders for our development from like a neurological and biological perspective. I think there were some studies I was particularly reading that literally tracked how people are responding to different passages in Harry Potter. Ones that were kind of just more stale, like kind of filler passages, and ones that were parts where exciting stuff was happening, or there was like a fight going on, or, you know, people were practicing spells or whatever it was. And, you know, fantasy does enable you to actually feel more deeply and empathize, and like you're saying, expand your horizons, expand your imagination. And I really feel like as Muslims, we need that. Not just as an ability kind of for our own personal development, but also to kind of just be a creative people. And that creativity transcends then just kind of like arts or what we can individually produce. I'm not telling everything back to some, you know, big political project, but I just think that creativity as an ummah is important. And I think that, you know, we even see this in the Quran, like the best stories, you know, have lessons in them, but they're also really amazing, epic, dramatic stories. When we talk about a prophet being able to speak to animals, when we talk about the sea being split, when the Quran talks about birds unleashing stones on an army of elephants, like these are amazing stories that completely blow anything Hollywood could produce out of the water. So I think that for all of those reasons, you know, getting inspiration from fantasy tales in particular, but just in general, obviously fiction, is really important for all of those reasons. But of course, not disputing the fact that stories do wield immense power. And I think one thing that I'm particularly interested in is how stories determine and present our identity as we understand it. Kind of going back to what you were saying, Sarah, about like the civilizational element. You know, we've spoken obviously about the politics and the perception of other peoples and things like that. But even in terms of how people see themselves, the nationalism that is within a lot of media, and especially in a lot of foreign media. Actually, there's a sister who did her master's thesis, sister I saw on Twitter, who kind of inspired me to kind of start thinking about doing an episode like this. Her name is Fatima Anisa Khalifa, and she did her master's thesis, which is really interesting and available to read, about nationalism in Indian and South Korean cinema, and how different films actually, you know, imbibe those qualities in what are, you know, post-colonial states. They're recent creations, and how they're using films and television series to actually still make people feel secure and rooted in that identity, because it's shifting. You know, those boundaries and the nation state as we understand it is still a recent creation, and so to tie people's allegiance to it, they actually need to present things in a way that through characters that people will get behind, and therefore root for the things that those characters stand for. And I think that that's really interesting.
So just to jump on to what you were saying a little bit earlier, Ashaj, I know in the beginning part of the segment we were talking about the dangers of media and storytelling and how they can pass on really scary messages, for example, or like alter our values in bad ways. But also, you know, like Aisha was giving the example with the Quranic stories, you can also give really good moral values through storytelling and media in ways that, you know, different age groups and different educational levels can all sort of appreciate and understand, right? Like, you know, that from the really basic tales of like Aesop's fables, right? Really simple children's stories that are designed to teach, like give moral lessons of like slow and steady wins the race, and like, you know, those kinds of little really nice things. And I was just thinking, just as we were talking about this, like, subhanAllah, imagine, we're going to go on and talk about representation in a later part of the segment, inshallah, but imagine you had like an actual good Muslim woman character who was like true to her Islam and like proud of being a Muslim and didn't rip her hijab off for the first white boy that showed any interest in her, and just like, you know, like really admirable qualities where you're just like, subhanallah, like, you know, she was amazing, and you know, she is someone that held on to her iman, is like a good role model. Like, you know, these are things I guess non-Muslim cohorts can probably appreciate more, because they actually look at these movies and they can see themselves in these characters, versus we can be like, oh yeah, I'm kind of a brave person, but, you know, no, I wouldn't do X, Y, Z, because their lives are so completely different and their realities are so completely different. And you get that same feeling of disconnect of being, for example, immigrants in a you know, foreign country, or Muslims in a non-Muslim land, etc., etc.
Yeah. Speaking of Quranic stories, like, I remember when I heard about this, it was so... you know, there are things that you read in the Quran and you can't help but smile. Like, it is like a, you know, there's so much gravity in the ayats, but there's also some things that are like that are just like very sweet, I think. And like, for example, in the beginning of Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَص. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to the Prophet ﷺ, and he says, we're relating to you the best of stories. So and that's the thing, is like the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is incredible. Like it spans like different parts of his life. There's so many different like relationships. There's huge arcs. Like there's, you know, like really low lows and then really high highs, and then there's an incredible ending. And this is all, it's the life of a prophet. So this actually happened. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like, that's the thing, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something, it's like the capital T truth. He says it's the best, this is the best of stories. So that means that there's objectively something that makes some like stories better than others. And I think, which is not to compare other like stories told by human beings to like the Quran and to, you know, like these stories that actually took place like in our history, but whatever is in the Quran is relevant to the rest of, you know, like everything else in our life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala draws metaphors and examples to things that we can relate to. So, and that, you know, it makes me think of like how certain things become more popular than others. Like not all stories are equal. Certain things become classics. Like some things last the test of time and are, you know, like relatable and beautiful and attractive to like huge amounts of people from like different backgrounds, from different countries. So yeah, there is something that makes certain stories better than others, that just like, you know, makes certain stories last as well.
No, absolutely. I feel like the stories that do that well are ones that actually draw on our universal human experiences. Like you're saying, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, and in all of the stories of the Quran, there's lessons that we can take from them, and there's something that everyone can relate to, regardless of, you know, what background you're from or what reality you're living in. There's struggles that we've all seen, or there are aspects of struggles that we've all been through. And you know, I think that that's obviously part of the wisdom, as you're saying, of the stories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in the Quran to reassure us and to support us as we're going through those struggles, and then show us that at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control, and, you know, look at how these amazing, beautiful stories ended. But obviously a story of less significance, which I'm always kind of just fascinated by in this respect, that I think stands as a classic for this reason, is, don't laugh, is you're already laughing, is Pride and Prejudice, but not just because I like it, but actually when I'm like, oh, I want a book to read, you know, I go on Goodreads and I go to like, okay, romantic fiction, or, you know, period drama or classics category, and literally, you know, you can go see for yourself. Pride and Prejudice is like objectively considered by all of these people as the best romantic book of all time, and I'm like, why? And really, it's, even though it was written so long ago, even though, you know, it's not necessarily applicable to the reality today of what people consider romance, and, you know, across, you know, different countries and different time periods, all of those things look different and have changed. I think it's so popular because it still captures the essence of the human experience when people go through that event and those incidents. And I think that just speaks to, again, the fact that if anybody is, I don't know, looking to write a classic or appreciate something like that, it has to really go down to those root elements.
They're just so relatable.
I read an article recently that was actually called "Why is Pride and Prejudice so good?" And the reason, it's basically, someone said it's not very linear in its development. You know, some things they just, you know, it starts with bad, gets better, fine, yay. There's ups and downs, very realistic things. You know, life is not like that. That's why you're so invested in it, because you're like, yeah, you know what, this is realistic in that sense. But also it has that, you know, that charm of, you know, the emotions. That's not realistic, maybe, I don't know. But, you know, it has that very rocky up and down, and that's the best part of why people relate to it so much. And that was one of the first films I watched when I was finally allowed to break out of the Die Hard shackles when I was 16. I was life-changing. I loved it so much.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing about Pride and Prejudice too, is that it has enough of everything. Like it has enough of like the trope that it ends on, like, you know, that like sweet romantic note, but also in the beginning, the like Mr. Darcy is like a huge jerk, and like he's not likable at all. Like when he first approaches her, she's like, "This is the worst day of my life." Like it's not, you know, it's not like exciting that like he's approached her or anything. And it has like everything. Like it has the romance, it has drama, and it has family relationships too, right? Like not just the romantic ones, and it has comedy. Like it's actually really funny, and of course it's beautifully written. But this is the thing too when it comes to like thinking about classics, and how like it's so difficult to relate necessarily to what is in Pride and Prejudice. Like it's such a different like lifestyle, different society. Obviously, like we're not like, you know, gonna be running into people at balls and like that's how you get married or whatever. Like it's so different. But that's why like I mean, okay, I'm like, I think I have unpopular opinions when it comes to this stuff, but this is why I really don't like a lot of like modern, like quote unquote Muslim fiction that is like, it's written and it becomes popular purely because it features Muslim characters and like Islamic themes and stuff, but it's like, it's just not a well-written story. So like, I prefer Pride and Prejudice to this. Like it even as much as, you know, like maybe I can quote unquote relate to the characters more, but if it's not like objectively well written and, you know, objectively to an extent, if it doesn't, you know, if I can tell that you just like, you thought that the story would be carried by the diversity element and by you mentioning like ethnic foods and like cute phrases that your mom said in Arabic and stuff, like you think that that is what like makes the good story, like, oh, Pride and Prejudice is good. Like, you know, I can't relate to it at all, but it's like, you know, it's good because of, I
mean, you say that you can't relate to it, but like as a 16-year-old Muslim girl, to be able to only have to only be allowed to glance at a boy from across the room, be constantly chaperoned, have like a million sisters who are always talking about, oh my gosh, do you think this meant he liked me? It was like, not completely relatable.
That's hilarious because, okay, The Godfather, which is like the least relatable movie in the world, that's the relatable part of it is when they're in, you guys know when they're in Italy and like the way that he like meets this girl and then there's like 10 aunties chaperoning them on their walk. I was like, dude, like this is so Muslim. Like, yeah, that movie I love, by the way, because
unrelatable things. Okay, one of my absolute favorite movies was My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, and I don't know if it's just because it related to like the desi culture and Greek culture seemed to be very similar, and how they had like really strong, passionate ties to the homeland, and how they had big, messy, sprawling families, and all of these things that, you know, she was self-conscious, going to school, blah blah blah. I mean, it speaks to a lot of the immigrant experience, I'd say, in general, especially those with large family groups. But it's so funny.
I think that's a big thing in like foreign cinema. So you don't get that kind of relatability when you watch like Hollywood. But anytime you kind of just step out of that, whether it's like, you know, Bollywood, I don't know, Lollywood, everything else, even Korean, you know, K-drama and stuff like that, they have these, there's like that cultural shift where you're like, oh wait, we do that, and it's something that's not very prevalent in the Western world. And that's why I feel like other cinema, a lot of people are shifting towards that now, because they have these, you know, I don't know, it's a relatability in a weird way. It's still foreign, but, you know, like, we do that.
Yeah.
I think it's one of, I can't remember which one of you guys was saying it, but it's that difference between the West and, let's say, Eastern cultures, between like individualism and, you know, the one that's more community-based, sorry, the word escaped me.
Yeah.
Exactly, that, and how we can all relate to that. You know, yes, we will do things that's good for the community, good for society. It's not always just about me, myself, and I. And I think that's something, even as Muslims, for the Ummah, you know, there are things, that ummatic feeling that we have, you know, love for your brother, what you love for yourself, all of that. Like, that sentiment is very rarely expressed in Western media, books, films, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you know, we had to bring it up if we're talking about entertainment and culture. I think that's why, obviously, as well, things like Ertugrul have proved so popular among Muslim communities across the world, but I feel especially in the diaspora, because I think people are really yearning for something like this. They're yearning for things that depicts not just kind of, you know, obviously the family element and all of that, but, you know, their Muslim identity, Muslims being obviously victors for once, and being kind of quite confident in their Islamic identity. I think people really wanted to believe that this is something that we can also enjoy, this is something that we can relate to, and those values really came to the fore in relation to those Islamic characters that are in the series. Although obviously I think it has been kind of overhyped, and I think it's interesting. I mean, I've seen articles and a lot of commentary from my friends who are Turkish as well about how when Turks watch it, they get a completely different message than what Muslims sitting in the West, the message that they get out of it. The message that they get is actually very much related to the geopolitical issues that Turkey is going through, and they read a lot more nationalism into it. Whereas Muslims are just like, oh my god, he makes dua, you know, before he goes to fight. Woo, he's Islamic. And it's like, yeah, but you know, you got to read between the lines as well.
Another thing that's really, really, really popular now is, like, you know, superhero films, and I'm actually on the camp where I like them, so I'm just going to say that now. I'm going to put that out there now. But I know a lot of people don't, but the thing is, the reason why I think a lot of people like it is kind of a continuation of that, where there's, you know, like basically we have a world that's pretty sucky and there's awful people in it, but there's some people, you know, who are a source of good, a source of strength, a sincerity that, you know, that can flip the situation. And we all want to be that people, you know, we all want to be that person who can, you know, fix everything, but we can't, as we have like a superhero that doesn't. And saying that though, I don't love the Marvel films that much, and they definitely are, you know, exhausting.
Is that only because you like DC?
Yeah, it is.
That doesn't count. That doesn't count then.
No, wait. Look, I want to justify this here, but also I want to say that, you know, comic books are a lot better in that sense. But anyway, basically, DC does this thing a lot better than Marvel, I think, where, you know, it's not always about superpowers or like mutant extraterrestrial, like, you know, that kind of threat. It's often based around very like systemic social issues. And, you know, for example, Gotham.
Yeah.
You know, like poverty and corruption are the reasons why so many people turn to crime in, you know, the DC universe. And that's very much, you know, real life as well. And then you have like the existence of like anti-heroes, where people are getting revenge for like, you know, where they've been wronged, you know. And it's very much a thing about justice. And are we not every day fighting for justice and, you know, kind of yearning for it when you follow the news and like politics and journalism? And, you know, why
we're all Batman in our own ways.
Yeah, exactly. We can all be Batman. That's exactly what I get from it. Because I'm like, you know, it's so unattainable in this corrupt world. So why not go to a means where, you know, we kind of get some relief and see some justice? You know, even if it's fictional.
We are not promoting vigilantism, by the way.
Of course not. Oh, well, you know, something that I do think, though, if we had, like, Islamic law and, like, a khilafah, would we even need, you know, like, would we need a Batman? You know, like, would Batman be allowed? I don't know. But, no, the thing is, this is more about the idea of a hero and what a hero is. And the best hero isn't the one who kind of like saves the day, really. It's more about, you know, the hero who doesn't want to be a hero, but they have to do it because, you know, there's no other choice. And there's like a sense of duty and responsibility. And, you know, it's kind of like strength and power is a burden rather than something you should strive for. And is that not like a very Islamic sentiment? Come on, you know,
Yeah.
And it's not just superheroes. This is also like, come on, Harry Potter did not want to do. He just wanted to be like a normal boy, not live under, you know, the stairs, go to school. You know, that's just what he wanted. But he's having to fight the Dark Lord, and now like Frodo.
Okay, I get it. This is all very targeted.
He just wants to do Hobbit things, but now he has to travel to Mordor and destroy the Wing. The notion of leadership and heroism is something that, you know, I think we can compare with the Islamic conception, and
100%.
not seeking the leadership or fame and striving for a cause. And that sincerity is this very, like, noble thing that people really want to see, you know? And that's why people get that thing from, like, superheroes and Ertugrul and all of that. And that's what people enjoy.
I agree with you though.
Yeah.
I think in terms of like superhero, I'm not as into it. Like I haven't watched. Okay, I can't keep up
pick a
with the
side.
Marvel universe. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, and I don't have a side in terms of like Marvel or DC either because I never read the comics. But the thing is, like when it comes to like the superhero movies that I like the most, it was there was something in addition to just the like insane Marvel Disney production value, which is what like I think a lot of them are turning into. But yeah, the Dark Knight trilogy, like hello Marvel Dilemmas,
so
right?
That was really
like,
good.
Yeah, dude. Also, okay, my favorite Marvel movies were I think Black Panther because like okay, Black Panther was beautiful. I don't like it was like it had that production value, but also like the hero had like he has these so like different relationships, and also there's really good social commentary.
That's what I was gonna say.
Like, the villain and everything, and yeah, it's about his relationship. Like also his sister has like an incredible role, so it's not just like him as like a main guy who's like so amazing, and then he like there's a romantic interest and he saves the day. No, like he's also even like what's his name, Chale. He's awkward sometimes too. Like he's pretty human in that sense, even though he's just like really cool superhero. And also Logan, like that was like the
X-Men
later one
is very good.
X-Men's got a lot of social commentary.
Yeah, I X-Men in general is probably I think one of my best like my favorite series within Marvel, like considering that I've consumed a limited amount, but Logan is so cool, and it's that like really interesting relationship between him and this little girl, which is like it's not that stereotypical,
and also his brother as well.
Yeah. No, and it's also it's they show Logan as like he's not in his prime anymore, right? Like he's kind of older, and he's just like he's always been kind of like gruff and everything, but like he's like he has gray hairs now. It's I don't know, like that's like you see the superhero like only in their prime. You don't see them like aging and deteriorating usually. It's just this like very shiny image of like them being amazing, them being noble, them saving the day. So I like those ones where it is just like dang, like yeah, he has like, what is it, titanium claws, but he's a human being, you know? Yeah.
Okay, the both of you have kind of convinced me, because I was somebody who's just like very snobby about superhero films, like, oh, for God's sake, another Marvel one. But definitely what you're saying, and I, in terms of, according to you, the DC universe highlighting more deep-rooted social issues, I definitely see that as true. That's the thing. I'm frustrated at superhero films that just are completely this superhero complex and very much as well internalized imperialism. Like Captain America is just full on propaganda, right? There's no ifs and buts about it. So that is not enjoyable to watch. But at the same time, I can definitely see how other things you can draw more out of it.
I'm glad I converted you.
Yeah. Speaking of American propaganda, so there, you know, Hollywood is its own beast, and it's also the largest of the beasts. Like it's so dominant in terms of just like you know, what is consumed globally in terms of cinema. But it's also, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people don't break out of it. Like, especially if you live in an English-speaking country, there's so much from coming out of Hollywood that you could just watch that. But like we mentioned this, you know, like briefly earlier, which is that when you watch other like cinemas from other countries, obviously they're not all the same, but you see something very different. Like you even see different tropes and like different styles and everything. And it is, you know, like there's something distinct about Hollywood that, I don't know. I mean, for one thing, okay, I will say that like I don't hate like super high production value superhero movies that are just like really, like Black Panther comes out of Hollywood, right? Because they have so much money to like spend on a movie like that. But there's a lot more, you know, like it's not just purely like storytelling isn't just entertainment, right?
No, of course. I mean, this is the thing. There's good and bad everywhere. And I think obviously some of the ones that we've been talking about are a little bit more as well of the better things. Like, you know, we're not talking about just every single series that is on Netflix. We're talking about the big budget blockbuster movies that tend to be, you know, more action oriented, or, you know, there's nothing overtly problematic in them, although we've already found some elements. But honestly, I feel like I've been going off of Western stuff and Hollywood films for many years now. I mean, as I just said, I just feel like I can't find anything to watch these days. Whereas when I was younger, I remember always feeling like, oh yeah, okay, this is coming out in the cinema, this is going to be released soon, and looking forward to those dates. Now, I really watch few and far between, and the primary reason is honestly just the degeneracy in just everything. Like, it used to just be kind of certain comedies, and now it's honestly just everything. Like, comedies, of course, are completely unwatchable, especially with your, you know, family members or other, you know, kind of adult people in your family and children, like just everyone. And it's become so hard to really enjoy anything and relate to their characters, relate to their experiences, relate to their jokes. And every new thing that is released on Netflix these days, because obviously in the pandemic no one has been going to the cinema, everything released is exactly like this. And even kind of genres that used to be safer, like I can't remember who it was earlier who was saying about horror films. Sada was saying, right? You don't watch horror films. So we went through a phase where, because we couldn't find anything to watch, we ended up watching horror films. And it used to be just, you know, oh look, they're just like kind of cheap scares, or, you know, look, it's a djinn again and they have to have an exorcism. Like it's nothing terrible that, you know, you can't watch. But now, even in horror movies, they find a way to integrate completely useless scenes that are just wholly inappropriate, that as Muslims obviously we would not want to watch. And now even they're starting to get into historical dramas, which previously used to be safe because it completely doesn't suit the time period to be showing very inappropriate scenes. It's, you know, not what people did. And now, obviously, with the release of Bridgerton on Netflix, like, even the dialogue that was said when I was just seeing certain clips, just scrolling through my social media, was so wholly inappropriate. And nobody even cared. That people don't care anymore that, oh, this isn't realistic, this isn't actually depicting the time accurately. They are just looking for these kinds of scenes, looking for that, for those very sexualized elements to be integrated into these films and series. And I just find it obviously frustrating that then you can never, that you know, you can't watch these things. But I also see it as part of a broader agenda, where I feel like a lot of Hollywood stuff now is really narrowing people into very specific audiences. And in doing so, it actually kind of caters to the individualism that we're seeing and an atomization of society in general. It separates families because we've all got our own devices now. You know, you can upgrade your Netflix package and everybody can watch on their own screens at the same times different things that are aimed at them. So it's just actually kind of feeding into a broader social agenda where families, you know, first it used to be that everyone's watching television, families don't eat together anymore. Now families don't even watch together anymore because there's so few things that you can actually watch together as a family. If I want to sit down with my parents and my siblings and my cousins and watch something, the option is like Paddington as a family film. It's like, that didn't used to be what family films were. Okay, yes, Paddington was cute, but you know, it's not the kind of film that, you know, you'd want to watch like with the whole family.
You're right. And you can only watch it so many times.
I mean, yeah, no. I do feel you on the whole sexualization front. We were talking about this just before we started recording, actually, about how, you know, stuff that, say, 10 years ago would be an R-rated thing is now like a PG-12, PG-15, you know, movie. It's just, they've completely just, I don't know what's going on. Like, it's so widespread and normalized. I think that's the other really scary thing. So, you know how we were talking about seeing characters that you relate to in films, normalizing certain values, etc. I think by putting these sorts of scenes, and like you were saying, Aisha, you know, they're now putting these like sex scenes or like really, really graphic, unnecessary scenes into all sorts of random genres. It's not just the like hardcore romance movies that do it. It's now like action films or horror films. Like, and you're like, what is the point of this scene? Number one, but number two, normalizing it to the point where kids, and you know, oftentimes like, okay, in a Muslim household, maybe they wouldn't be watching it with their children, but like in a, you know, if you're not Muslim, for example, if your parents aren't as clued up on like ratings and stuff, if it says PG-13, sure, PG-13 means kids over the age of 13 can watch this. You know, like we can see the impacts directly on society and like kids nowadays. In June of this year, Ofsted in the UK, which is the Office for Standards of Education in England, in the UK, released this report which showed that 90% of schoolgirls were reporting sexual harassment, and they thought it was so normal. Like they didn't even bother reporting it or telling their teachers about it because they're just like, it happens all the time. Like it's not even like, oh my gosh, like, you know, if your handbag gets nicked, it's like, I'm going to report this. It's like, it was so commonplace, and like boys are comparing and compiling lists of nudes that they were getting and like whole albums of like trophies almost. It was really, really sickening, and it was really sad in that the adults who'd found this out through the report were shocked that girls would just accepted this as a normal part of growing up, essentially, versus the kids who were going through it were just like, yeah, I mean, this is school. Like, this is school, right? This is what everybody goes through. And I was reading an opinion piece, and I think it was the either the Times or the Guardian. This girl at university was saying something similar about how when she was at university, this video of a really intimate private video of hers went and did the rounds on social media. All of her classmates and stuff were joking, like, you know, and actually bigging her up in a way, being like, oh my gosh, you're such a, you know, like her prowess was now like something to be proud of, that she didn't even realize she'd been violated, that these images had been shared, because that was how it was taken. Like, wow, this is something you should be proud of. Like, oh dude, that's so sick, blah, blah, blah. And it was only like several years later that she realized what exactly had happened. And I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have like kids, like siblings in schools or like speak to teenagers, but this is not unique. Right? It happens so frequently. And I think, like Amne was saying earlier about media and just how, I don't know what the right word is here, but like, you know, how dangerous it can be sometimes. Like normalizing sexual harassment, normalizing sexual images in general is definitely one of the big downfalls of it, I think.
Yeah, we talk about normalization and like being desensitized to things through media. It's in the context of violence, right? Because like we can all kind of agree on, you know, like shouldn't kill people. But when it comes to like sexualization and everything, like you see a huge spectrum of like what people are desensitized to, because like I don't know, like it feels like sometimes we just forget that certain things are haram to view, and that certain like parts that like this is not to like pass fatwas about like people are not allowed to like go out in public because you might see a woman's awra, which is just like her wrist or like her hair or something. But historically, like that, it was more shocking, right? Like in different societies, it's shocking to see somebody's like hair versus now it's not shocking to see somebody in a bathing suit. And that's the thing, like that desensitization, it has a spiritual effect on you. And that like what is, you know, kind of like considered normal now. And this is like one of the things I hate the most about like Muslim discourse, and I don't know if this is just like a thing here, but like how Muslims will shame other Muslims for being like prudish because like they're, you know, like they don't look at certain images. They're like, I'm not going to watch that movie, even though it's like whatever, like PG-13, whatever, if it has stuff like that, I'm going to cover my eyes when there's a kissing scene, even if like that's thing, like we don't do we, I don't know if people don't know or if they just like get that these things are actually impermissible to see. And it also becomes a thing where it's like, haha, it's such a Muslim thing to like, you know, skip through certain scenes. It's like, dude, you still see the first second. Like, that's the thing. And that to say, like, I'm just not going to watch it because, like, I'm not even going to bother with skipping scenes. It's like, oh, wow, like, you're so extreme. Like, come on. Like, are you just never going to watch anything? It's like, I don't need to. Like, also, I can watch anime. Like, let's be real. Like, there is decent media. That's why I'm saying, like, outside of Hollywood, you do still have, like, relatively decent media. Even though, like, you know, other cinemas are progressing towards, like, being more raunchy, like Bollywood, you know, like like 90s Bollywood movies, really like you don't even see kissing scenes. Now you start to see more. It also like there's a spectrum of movies, like they're not all the same. But yeah, like that level of desensitization, it's not, I don't know, it's like we wait until something like makes us feel sick to our stomach, then we're like, oh, I shouldn't see this. It's like, dude, no, you should first like set your standard based on like what is impermissible and also what is even close to being impermissible, because you're not even supposed to go near zina, right? And zina is like, there's zina of the eyes as well and zina of the mind and the thoughts and everything. It's not just like physical. But yeah, you set your standard there and then you're like, okay, does this go near this? Even if like I've become desensitized to it, like virtue of where I live, whatever, then, you know, I'm not going to watch this, or I'm not even going to go near this. That should be the standard. It's not like, oh, once I start to feel uncomfortable, once it's awkward to be sitting next to my family watching this, it's like, I don't know, like we just have to kind of like, again, recognize the water around us, like turn inwards and like realize how desensitized we've become. I'm not saying that like I'm above other people in this sense, because like I see this media, like I watch things on TV that like I know if like, I don't know, I don't watch TV anymore actually, but like they're like, okay, when I was growing up, like even certain cartoons, there were like cartoons that our parents would not like. I don't know if this was a Muslim thing, but like my parents didn't let us watch SpongeBob because the first okay.
Oh my god, thank you.
I thought you were gonna say Disney Channel.
Yeah, okay,
what was wrong with SpongeBob?
No, okay, first of all, we didn't have a cable, so there was no Disney Channel. Like, but
that's
also,
the reason.
Yeah, but with SpongeBob. No, okay, the thing with SpongeBob, one thing is there was this, like, you know, those auntie forwarded emails that were like, one kid watched SpongeBob and he went insane. Like, that was the thing. So they were like,
wrote that.
Dude, no, they literally, like, my mom, my aunts were like, oh my god, like, we can't let our kids watch this show. But also, what they found inappropriate about it was stuff like underwear jokes. Like, dude, that was considered inappropriate. Like, if I had, okay, you know those books like, Captain Underpants, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I would not have shown those to my parents when I was a kid.
That's true. We used to draw hijabs and like abiding on them. You can't do that.
Yeah, like the standard was so different, right? Yeah. Like that. There was like really like casual cartoons, like PBS and stuff. If there was a relationship and whatever, if they're depicting middle schoolers or something, we would change the channel. We'd be like, oh my god, or our parents would come and be like, what are you watching? Like, and now it's like people watching Game of Thrones and stuff. Okay, I guess
that's
it's the clean version, but
this generation, I think,
honestly,
that's the one that really pushed the water out. You know, like nudity and incest. And
absolutely.
And the thing was, it's like, it's pushing you to, so you know how you have that natural fitra of like, this feels wrong, goes against my morals, this is just not right? I feel like there are deliberate attempts in modern cinema to see how far we can push people's morality just completely out of the water. Like, if you find anything wrong with anything, it's like, what is wrong with you? You're so intolerant. You see this with sexuality. You see this with, you know, the whole LGBT movement that's being constantly forced down everybody's throats in every single show that you like care to turn on the TV. And it's like, why it's so hard, and Sarah, I think what you're saying is so important. You really have to safeguard your iman so strongly, because they're pushing so hard from every angle with this narrative of you trying to make this all normal, to be like, no, you're the strange one for thinking this is not right. You're the strange one for thinking, oh my gosh, how can this be? Like, I remember once by I was flicking through channels and like the Kardashians, some ancient season was on, right? They were doing some photo shoot. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, everybody watches the Kardashians. What's the big deal? I don't understand it. And they were doing some photo shoot, and the comment that I think it was like, the eldest Courtney was saying to like one of the middle sisters was like, oh, you know, you look so stunning. You're going to be on every inmate's like wall poster and something, and they're going to like fantasize about you. I was sitting there horrified, being like, astaghfirullah, like why? I felt like just watching it, I felt violated for her. Like, this is such a disgusting, but for them, they were like, oh my gosh, yes. And like, again, you know what we were talking about, like morals and like pushing this onto kids and what they learn from these things. Can you imagine if you grow up and that's your daily diet of TV, and this is like what you then aspire to be and look like and think like? Because it's not just what they look like, it's what their values are, what they aspire to be. All of that is pushed down on the people watching as well.
No, absolutely.
People try to end it with like, you know, it's just TV, you're gonna watch it and that's it. But it really does come into your real life, because after Game of Thrones, there was this article I read where like porn haram anyway, but the searches on porn websites where the incest category had been spiked up. You know, that's just horrendous. I'm not saying people are going to turn to incest, but there was a really like real world, you know, translation of that. And this whole thing about, you know, nudity really, really stresses me out, because, you know, we have like perfume adverts on billboards, you know, literally you can't even drive somewhere and this right there. And, you know, I don't know if you guys saw it recently where someone said that, you know, the Amazon series of Lord of the Rings, there was going to be a scene with that might feature some nudity. And I was like, what? Like, that's literally a family-friendly movie. That's the only reason I love it so much, because I can watch it with everyone. And, you know, it doesn't even focus on romance that much. And it's kind of like, they're trying to push it in for anyway. And someone recently had this, like, think piece, I don't know what it was, it might have just been some sort of fanfic, I don't know, but they were kind of saying that, you know, Frodo and Sam were actually homosexual lovers, and I'm like, why can you not just appreciate their very brotherly love, or their platonic
They do the
friendship?
same thing about Sherlock, you know, and like Sherlock.
Yes, it's horrendous. Like Tumblr like, is a no, it's not a safe place.
Come on, man, they're just friends. Appreciate the bromance for what it is.
Exactly.
No, okay, that's a really significant thing about like the just like failure of so many forms of media to depict male friendships in a normal way. Either they're hella toxic or they're like, dang, they must be gay. Like, no, they can just be friends. And now, like, a lot of men struggle to have like good, decent friendships with other brothers without being like either accused of being gay or it just being like a toxic environment. I'm not like making a declaration about all the brothers and like their friendships, general, but this is a thing.
In general, just depicting relationships that aren't romantic relationships. Like, man, come on. There are so many other relationships in life that you have with people that you meet. Like, you can't walk 2 feet with apparently having to fall in love with the postman because, you know, he said thank you when you greeted him or whatever. It's like, ugh. Yeah. Frustrating.
That's true.
Okay, I have some good news for you, Amina, about Lord of the Rings, because I was also really worried about the fact that there was allegedly going to be some nudity in it, and I was just like, why? That's going to kill the whole thing. I just read, like, literally the day before yesterday that, alhamdulillah, there's not nudity in that sense. It's not sexualized. It's just that they're trying to depict, sorry for everybody who doesn't want spoilers or has no idea what we're talking about, but they're trying to depict the transition of elves and men into orcs. And so essentially it's a very gruesome process in which
so
they would
Gollum style nudity.
Exactly.
Clickbait article.
Yes.
Then. I got really worried.
No.
I was going to start a petition, riot, become a villain. That's my origin story.
Those Christian moms who like campaign against certain movies.
Literally, I think
that's gonna be me.
No, we need to make a Muslim version of that, because seriously, definitely, like you said, Game of Thrones, I really find is a litmus test, because it wasn't just that there's inappropriate scenes, it's that these inappropriate scenes are central to the storyline and they've been normalized as a result of it. And I'm sorry, but nothing speaks more to the fact of its normalization than when Jason Momoa was at Comic-Con, I think it was, a few years ago. And obviously this recording was leaked a few years afterwards, and it was after then as well, the Me Too thing happened and people were talking about this much louder. But he literally said, somebody said, what's like the best part about your job? And he, to an audience of people, says, oh, well, I get to rape beautiful women. And it's like, this is, you know, this is the person who's actually doing that. Don't tell me that it hasn't normalized it, that he thinks he can say that to an audience and the audience are just going to laugh. And they did laugh. And then 3 years later, somebody saw the video and was like, this is outrageous. And it went viral on social media. But I think the other thing I kind of want to as well highlight that I personally have issues with, but I don't know, not many people seem to agree with me. You guys tell me what you think. But I'm really frustrated at the desensitization to violence in films as well. And particularly, I know stuff like The Purge, I honestly just can't watch, because it's not a horror in my mind. This is just senseless violence. It's people killing other people. And okay, the politics behind the storyline and all of that is very interesting, but I just find it really sickening that we think that we can watch that as entertainment. You know, what is it any wonder, like, how is this really that different from the live stream of the New Zealand attacker when he went into a mosque and killed 50 people? This is exactly the same, except that you follow the lives of the characters a little bit more and you're more familiar with them, so you have an attachment to them, even though obviously it's not real. And I just really think that the idea that this is something that we can enjoy. I mean, I was watching it. I watched it once with my cousins, and I actually had to stop because it was just reminding me too much of a war zone, and thinking that this is actually people's day-to-day reality. And we're supposed to be sitting there like, oh yeah, oh, I hope they get out. Oh, look, he's really bad. As though this is just, it's not entertainment at all. And I think that, again, these things, as you were saying, Sarah, they have a spiritual impact on us. As human beings, you know, we feel empathy. We're not supposed to watch something like that and not feel moved. And if we do, then I just don't think that's a positive route that any of our souls need to go down in that sense. But aside from that, I think one of the other issues that I have with a lot of stuff just these days, particularly on Netflix, is the way in which it's become so, like, everything produced is just a copycat of each other. I really, like, after trying a few series out, I realized that they actually, I'm sure at Netflix headquarters, they have like the same storyboard for every series. And it's like at episode 4, we introduce this new character. At episode 6, a crisis happens, but by episode 7, it's resolved. And then at this point, you know, we end the final episode with kind of a cliffhanger so that if we get renewed for season 2, we can pick it up. And after kind of watching a couple and they were all going along this like similar release of information in each episode, I was like, this is so boring. I can't be bothered to watch this. Like, I know that this core issue that's raised in episode 1 is not going to be solved until episode 9. And it just all seems incredibly corporate, incredibly contrived, and I can't enjoy it. I don't feel like it's being true to the storyline. And kind of going back to, I guess, what you were saying, Sarah, when you started this aspect of the conversation, this is where I feel like foreign cinema has a lot more to offer, in that it just presents these different relationships. It is a bit more family friendly, even though, of course, some of the same values and morals are being pushed through that cinema as well. It does kind of just bring stories that are different, you know, from completely different perspectives, from places where people have different considerations. Like, even if obviously there are some inappropriate Bollywood films, or, you know, what Amina was talking about, Korean dramas and like the Korean wave, you know, family considerations are part and parcel of those films and series because people care about what their families think. And here, you know,
parents always getting in the way.
Exactly. You know, but that's relatable and that's enjoyable, and seeing those different relationships pan out, as opposed to a single person, you know, living her life in whatever city, and occasionally she goes back to her parents for the holidays and the parents have something to say
and she calls them by their first names.
And like, don't listen to your parents, they don't know what you're going through, who cares about them, forgetting that they like dedicated half their life to raising you, etc. etc.
No, that's another reason why our parents didn't want us to watch a lot of stuff as kids, because like it's such a trope to depict parents as like horrific, like people who are just like always against you, always trying to limit you, always like uncool and weird and stuff like, so yeah.
I also really like, when it comes to like foreign cinema or like non-Hollywood stuff, I also just really enjoy seeing what's like normal to them, or like their cultural quirks. And I feel like so much of Western, culture is like exported en masse, wholesale to the whole of the world, right? And everybody kind of adopts it as like people talk about high school culture, even though I didn't go to high school, I went to secondary school, right? It's but like, and like lockers and like the gym and like all these like things which I know about. And I was telling this to Sarah when we were talking, I was like, Narnia and like frat parties are on the same level of not real things to me, because that's literally, it's not my reality. It doesn't happen in this country, right? But in foreign cinema, what I like is like the different cultural nuances, like things that are normal, things that they find shocking. And it's really interesting, and you really realize how much Western cinema you've absorbed and taken as being the status quo, when you're just like I remember I was watching this, it was a Korean movie, and it was, what was it? She was older, he was younger, or like he was a divorcee or something, right? And they come out, they tell their parents they want to get married, and it's like the biggest scandal. And I just remember like there's a scene where everybody's gasping or whatever, or like there's the shock horror, right? And I was literally sitting in my bedroom being like, what's happened? Like, why is this the reaction? Like, what's going on here? Like, I don't get it. Like, the cultural nuance is lost on me. And it was only after watching a bunch of different ones where I was like, oh, okay, because it means this, and this is what's important to them, and like, these are like the checklist characteristics. And it's nice. It just reminds you, I think, that your worldview, in a very small way, and I'm not trying to generalize, other cultures through media, as we were saying, like, 1,000 Splendid Suns did. But it's just nice to see that there are other status quos around. Like,
Absolutely.
there are other ways of interpreting things, and people can have different values. Because I think that's the other thing. In the West, you are not allowed to have anything but the liberal value and liberal mindset. Otherwise, there's something really, really wrong with you, right? So it's nice. It's comforting.
Yeah. In Korean stuff, have you noticed how, like, whenever somebody alludes to something raunchy, or is like, is like, oh my god, I can't believe, like, did they just like go out, like, on a date or whatever, like she went over to his house, whatever, they always call it American style.
Yes.
They're like, what do you think this is, Hollywood? Like, whenever somebody does something extreme, they're like, whoa, dude, like, come on, like,
or
we're not
hug.
American. That's it. Huh?
Hug. It was like, we're not American, we don't hug. And I was like,
yeah, no, that's why it is very watchable. Like, honestly, Korean stuff in general is, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of it, but in general, it is like extremely clean compared to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does always, that's the thing, like, even though it typically, I think, portrays aristocracy and like chaebols and stuff, like people who are the heads of these like huge conglomerate corporations, even the chaebol like goes home, takes off his shoes before he walks in, puts on slippers, and then gets yelled at by his grandma. Like, it's still, like, it still has that, like, family element. Like, yeah.
It's still important.
And they also have, like, okay, for Muslims, like, they do, like, their blind dates, like, it's very Rishta style. They, have, like, arranged marriages and stuff. So it's, yeah, But it's different, at least. You don't have to, I don't know. That's like, sometimes it's interesting, not because it's relatable, but because it's refreshingly different from Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of these series and things that we're watching on Netflix, they're designed to be bingeable. And it's literally, I mean, you see on Netflix now, they have a category where it says, for a weekend binge, that you can watch like 6 episodes for, in one day. And just the fact that, regardless of what our personal habits may be, the fact that it's marketed as that you watch 6 hours over a day or 2 days, I think that that's just insane. And really, I think, and still at the end of that, you often finish those things still feeling unsatisfied. You still then feel like, oh, I want to watch more. There's something else that, to again, just give you that high. I'm sure like there's some chemical thing going on in your brain when actually you're doing all of this stuff, because you feel really unsatisfied. But I remember that, Sarah, you were telling me that that's one of the things that you've noticed lacks in other kinds of cinema, where you don't feel like completely unsatisfied every time you finish something, and it's just like a much more relaxed watching experience.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is like I think it's the nature of like certain shows, but also like I lack self-discipline when it comes to like just not binging things. So like I stopped watching things, period, like for a long time. Like I don't watch, even now, like I don't watch shows, or if I do start a show, like I watch max like 1 episode a day or 1 every 2 days. But I think it's because like, yeah, they design it in a way where it is bingeable, and where also not just the fact that like they leave you on a cliffhanger at the end of an episode and like you have to continue the story, but also the like, I think the stimulus you get from shows that are like extremely colorful, like really like it's a huge emotional roller coaster. There's so much stimulus, is that like it feels so low to go back to normal life. After seeing like this incredible production, you go back to your life and like, the feeling when you walk out of a movie theater and you're like, what the heck is this real world? Yeah. Like that, but it's like you're in your bedroom and like you have to go back to normal life. Like you have to go do boring things. But I noticed a different thing when I was like, I only watched a handful of like Iranian films, which first of all, when I was looking these up too, like I noticed that like I was looking up like best ones, whatever, that have come out of Iranian cinema, and I was reading the little plot synopses, and all of the plot synopses were about like the most minute things. Like I remember there's one about like a guy who loses his shoes, and the whole movie is about him trying to find his shoes. And then like and all of these plot synopses were about these like very like zoomed in like small things about life. And the ones that I watched at least were like, some of them were bigger stories, but it was so beautiful to watch. And also at the end, I didn't feel like, oh my God, I just watched this like huge production and like I feel empty now. Like I need to go back to, no, it was just like, this was super nice. I can go back to doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, they were just, they were really beautiful. And also like they were like super overt religious tones in like, and I think they were really well done. Like the ones that I saw that were good were, one was The Willow Tree, which is like, the thing too is also like they're just so beautiful, like they're so artistic, and like not again in like a Marvel flashy way, but just like you can pause that film at any point and it's like so like beautifully set up, the color grading, everything. It's very grainy, even though I don't think it's like that old of a film. Like they purposely film it on film. I don't know the technical stuff, but it is just like really beautifully made. And that one is like, it's so good, and it has like more of a topsy-turvy plot line, but it still ends with just like, and it is still about, it's also about a person who, it's not that typical like young, like in their prime romantic interest who's just like, like reaching the top of their career or like achieving that perfect relationship. Like it zooms in on a different like type of person. But also A Cube of Sugar, which doesn't have like, it doesn't necessarily have a plot. Like that's the thing, is like typically I hate things like that where I watch it and I'm like, okay, what did I get out of this? But you're literally just following this family as they're going through the process of like prepping for the daughter's like she's like the oldest niece, like they're prepping for her wedding, and it's just the family like like making her clothes and then cooking, and people are coming over and they need to like set up the backyard. And first of all, it's beautifully made, like the colors are insane, like it's so beautiful to watch, but also it is just like you're just watching a family being a family. I think also it made me miss like the times where we did visit Algeria and we had that like, my grandparents' huge backyard and like there's a sheep there and like we're preparing for somebody's wedding or for Eid or whatever. But it is like, it doesn't feel this like, I don't know, and it has emotional ups and downs, but like you see everyone's emotional ups and downs. Like the aunt and uncle are having like some troubles with their marriage, or like these kids go into the backyard and they start like getting spooked by like jinn stories and stuff. And it's just so many. I guess, is that called like slice of life or whatever, where they're just like, it's literally just depicting like people's everyday lives, but it's so beautiful to watch. And the last one that I really liked was called God is Close, which again, also, it's not like, I don't know, there's not this like huge topsy-turvy plot line, but the main character is like, he's atypical, and then at the end, like he, actually, in all of these movies, there's like really, like overt religious tones, but especially in God is Close and The Willow Tree, at the end, like the resolution and the happy ending is them coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Aww. So you get that, you're like, you can actually relate. So yeah, that was, I just remember watching them like, and just being like, this is so like different from what I'm used to. Like, so.
See, I think that's a really good example of the kind of, what I guess we call Islamic media that we can aspire to. Because you see this conversation a lot, obviously, people talking about, Muslim representation, and we need that in films. But then I think that people forget that we also do have alternative forms of media that already exist, or just, alternative ways that we can produce our own media. It's not just about kind of finding a place in what we see as the norm, but actually exploring different things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think none of these things that I just mentioned are like Muslim parallels to Hollywood productions. They're their own thing. But I think what so many, like, I guess diaspora or just Western Muslims in general want is, I want the Muslim version of like that Hollywood blockbuster. Like, just put a hijab on her and like, make him brown, and like then I'll be happy. And like that's what people want out of representation. But I think we have to realize that there's something fundamental to the genre that is problematic. Like, you can't just superimpose Islam onto certain things.
Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying, Sarah. I think this is the thing. I understand the need that people feel, and we've all been sitting here for an hour talking about how it's nice to kind of relate to the characters that we're seeing and relate to those experiences, and that's important. And of course, as well, what other people, because it's not just about us, but other people seeing Muslims on a screen, can make them more accepting of then the Muslims that they see in real life, especially given all of the stereotypes around us and, all of the bad propaganda about Muslims in the post 9/11 era. So I completely understand that, and I understand why people think that that's important. But to be honest, I am frustrated at this conversation because, like you said, it seems to just be very much relegated to just aesthetics and Muslims just being there in these roles and creating roles for Muslims without actually thinking about what are the storylines Muslims are being given. Okay, storylines to an extent. People don't want a terrorism storyline, but they don't really know what alternative storyline they want for that. They just don't want that storyline. They don't think about the morals and the values and the messages, the underlying messages that are being given. And I just think that when it comes down to it, it does not matter a jot if you have a Muslim character on a show who is embodying the same values as every other single character in that show. And this is the thing that I think we do need to accept to a degree, as we have all been kind of speaking about already, that the film industry and the media in general is a vehicle for imparting some of these civilizational values. Yeah, whether it's about kind of the politics and unifying people behind a specific nationalistic identity, whether it's about the social norms and kind of, pushing LGBT kind of agendas that they believe are important to their society, whether it is sexualization and changing social norms that people feel like, yeah, this is now how our reality is today, and they want to depict that through film. You are not going to find roles, or if you are, you're going to find very few that actually want to show somebody who embodies Islamic values, because that doesn't fit with the overall agenda of media. And this is why, the Riz test is something that I know some Muslims, are involved in. Basically, it's a test that's been developed by the British actor, Pakistani actor Riz Ahmed, who basically, I don't know the exact kind of dimensions that he looks at, but basically he's got like a test which you can apply to different films to establish how Islamophobic is that movie, what is the presentation of Muslim characters in that film like. And, he's done the people who run this test as kind of, inspired by him and kind of led by him, initiated by him. They, release various statistics about the fact that, 90%, this isn't an accurate statistic, but just, in that range, the point is the vast majority of films show Muslims in a negative light, or they don't provide adequate roles that Muslims could occupy or show them in any kind of positive light. But I kind of feel like, yes, okay, Muslim representation is bad, and I'm not saying we should, tolerate that, but I genuinely feel like it's likely to stay that way because of the industry as a whole. And, this is probably controversial for some people, but I really feel that to an extent, although there's obviously a natural desire to want to have stories that we can relate to, I think that a lot of the desire to see people who look like you on television is manufactured. This is distinct from having your own stories told or seeing issues you can relate to, but the idea that we need to have every single race or ethnicity represented at, for example, Hogwarts, which are literally conversations I've seen people having, all Lord of the Rings, which in my opinion completely is contradictory to the storyline and the history of that book and how it was written. The fact that these are now discussions that people have because we live in a culture where everybody, every race, every ethnicity, every sexuality wants to see themselves on screen in order to be validated. I think that that's a problem. Are we saying that you can't appreciate a story or imagine yourself as the characters because they don't have the same name as you? In a story where their background means nothing as well. I'm not talking about stories where we're accurately depicted or the stories are our own. I'm talking about, as you're saying, just swapping in the aesthetics. The fight for visibility, it serves a certain purpose, but I think people really over-exaggerate that purpose to make people feel like they're being represented, whereas actually it's only at the superfluous level. It's all surface. As Muslims, we do need to think about this from an Islamic perspective, and if our purpose in life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and part of that is to impart a good representation of Islam. But that's not the same as satisfying ourselves that, I watched a film and because there was a character from an Egyptian immigrant background, I feel less alienated. I feel that people aren't going to look at me so surprised, in such a surprised way when they find out that my parents are also from that country or from a neighboring country. And that, moreover, does not justify an incorrect portrayal of Islam. And this is, one that very often reiterates the liberal delineation of tradition and religion with backwardness, and progressivism with justice and fairness. And you know, you see this very subtly in characters where Muslims, okay, they're not terrorists, but they're always shown to have this internal dilemma between their traditional side and their more progressive element that, you know, wants to go along with the main character or, you know, do other things that their parents not allowed to let them do. This is a compromise that I don't think we can tolerate, even for the sake of being visible. And I think that we should also think about that subscribing to this argument really finds us aligning very much with people who in particular want any and every kind of sexuality to also be represented and also be visible. And this is kind of links to the degeneracy that we've all complained about seeing and how this has been normalized in so much of what we see. So, you know, if I don't think we can in good faith use the same arguments as them and then be like, oh no, but not you guys, right? You've got to accept that actually the industry there serves a purpose and that it's not going to be as accommodating as we want it to be.
I think it also I feel like part of it, I don't want to make huge sweeping generalizations, but obviously part of being wanted, of seeking that representation in mainstream media is to increase that feeling of belonging to society, right? Of feeling like you're part of it. Look at me, I'm just like you. You know, don't be afraid of Muslims because, you know, we're not all terrorists, we're just people like you, right? And that's very commonly the narrative you see whenever there's like a Muslim character on TV. But the truth of it is, no, we're not just like you, right? We're Muslim. We believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are working for Jannah. We are working for, you know, Islam. We do da'wah. We love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are all, you know, we do believe there are limits. There is no complete freedom in our actions and speech, thought, or whatever else. You know, those are not values that align with our Islamic values, right? And that is not the narrative, like Aisha H was saying, that's going to be pushed by mainstream media, because that is not their narrative, right? They're like two completely, they're not parallel, they're diametrically opposite, right? So to think that we are ever going to see true Islam represented on TV is naive, if that's not too harsh to say. Mm-hmm. And I think we really risk losing our Islamic identity if, like Aisha H was saying, you know, oftentimes they link, you know, old-fashioned, backwards, old values and often Islamic values with what's holding you back, and the progressive, good Western liberal values as what's going to push these Muslims forward and bring them into the mainstream, etc., etc. Like, that's a really dangerous trope to accept.
So I have a problem with the Riz test. Not that I know a lot about it, but, you know, so yes, like, you know, portrayal of Muslims as terrorists is Islamophobic, whatever. But what does it have to say about Muslims who are portrayed, you know, as partying and, you know, engaging in like sexual stuff and stuff like that? You know, thing like, you know, the Muslim representation in Rami, for example, would that fall under a anti-Muslim kind of portrayal? And that's why it's not very representative of the sentiment and, you know, the, you know, as a Muslim audience, that's not standards we go by, and that's like what you're saying, that, you know, we have higher standards, we're serving God. And then you talk about visibility on the screen. That's a really interesting topic, especially with Lord of the Rings, as, you know, Aisha H mentioned, because people often say that, you know, there are not very many female characters in Lord of the Rings. The thing is, though, the few characters they do have are really, really, you know, strong, powerful characters, saying that. But also the fact is that I don't actually look at the characters in Lord of the Rings and feel unrepresented, because I can see myself as, you know, like Aragorn, or even as Frodo. Yeah. I can see myself, you know, like, I can do that, I can be him, you know, I can lead this, I can save more, you know. Just the thing is, we go by a very... it's like identity politics, we label it in a very specific way, but if you go by characteristics, Absolutely. You can see representation. And, you know, I get it if it's like a very specific context, or, you know, people who are involved in making the media, but as people who only consume it, you can look out, you can branch out of that, personally. And so when people talk about, you know, having good female representation, you know, there is good film representation, and you don't have to rewrite past narratives to involve them. Because I remember, you know, Glorfindel was replaced by Arwen in the film, and I was kind of, I don't know, just internalized misogyny or something. I'm like, you know, go away, bring him back. But, you know, it's just like, you don't have to see yourself only via things like, you know, female, male, you know, this person is black, this person is white. Saying that, though, diversity is a problem in, you know, a lot of media, stuff like that as well. So I don't want to undermine that, but yeah.
This is the thing. I do think that, yes, diversity is important, and definitely, you know, female representation is important, and having good female role models. And I mean, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, but I teach at a madrasa on the weekends, and one of my students once came up to me. You know, she's 7 years old, and we were like talking about films and stuff, and I said, I think Frozen 2 had come out around that time, and so I said to her, oh, you know, did you like Frozen? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, who's your favorite character? And she was like, Elsa. And me, with my own internalized misogyny and even just like the stereotype that we have about all Disney princess films, I was like, oh, is it because she's got a pretty dress? You know, she's 7. I was thinking that's what she'd appreciate. Mashallah, she's clearly thinking much bigger than me, because she turned around and she was like, no, because she's brave. And I was like, oh wow, okay.
You know, she told you.
Yeah, she told me, but also I was really grateful at the fact that, okay, this film, because it was about 2 sisters and it wasn't really, you know, romantic centric, and it's about more than just, you know, oh, the princess is in need and the prince comes and saves her. She was able to appreciate something else about that female character, and that resonated with her. And, you know, that is important at her age, but it's definitely important for at other ages as well. And definitely, you know, bringing in racial diversity is important in cinema overall and on television. I'm not disputing that, but I think that this is the issue, that it has become, like you've said, part of the culture wars, part of the identity politics, that I can't relate unless somebody who's exactly like me and this is represented. And I think that it would actually be more fruitful for us as Muslims in particular, because obviously, you know, we are Muslims. I'm not kind of going to speak for what other people from other different backgrounds should do, but that we start wanting to actually tell our own stories, not just have, oh yeah, somebody with hijab in that film, but actually a story about somebody who is a practicing Muslim, who is a hijabi. What are the struggles that she's going through? But, you know, just being creative and not feeling like unless we see ourselves in this way, we are not, you know, that's not good enough. We're not being validated. I think we need to as well recognize that we can kind of supersede our validation, right? Our validation ultimately comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that we are in the place and we are with the skills and the knowledge and experiences we have that He chose for us. Whether or not other people choose to judge us in a certain way is something that is to an extent out of our control. So we don't need to seek validation from them. There are other things that we can solve through increasing our visibility, but I feel like we need to transcend that aspect a little bit.
To tag on to what you've just said, Aisha, you know, with the recent rise in Islamophobia, I don't think just visible representation in media is going to fix that. You know, we're not going to suddenly have people who are super tolerant of Islam, you know, not just a woman in a headscarf, but Islam and all that it means, just because there's a lady in a headscarf walking around, or a guy with a beard.
Yeah,
I'm kind of in 2 minds about the like diversity representation conversation, because I do value like a degree of diversity in film and in books, but I think there's just a clear line between like superficial representation and then like actual representation. Like, I don't think that if we're using Marvel movies as an example, I don't think, what's his name? Oh shoot, I forget the name of the superhero, but there is a black guy who's in the Avengers who has the wings. What's the name?
Falcon.
Yeah. Okay, so that is a form of representation, but then Black Panther is a different form of representation, not because of the amount of black people, because it's about it first of all, it takes place like on the African continent, and also it represents like different African cultures, and also like it's not just about the aesthetics of like, oh, their costumes are based on like actual cultural clothes, but there's again that social commentary about the actual experience of like being African American versus being a continental African, the relationship between the two, the tensions in that relationship, all of these things. Like, I feel like that is meaningful representation, where it's not just about like
tokenism. The
person like being, it's not, they're exactly like, they're not just a token representative. It's actually as much as it is like a fantastical depiction, it is about like real life stories. And what you were saying, Aisha, about like how like we want to kind of like push the message that we're just like you, and we're actually not just like other people, like we are Muslims. It's like, I believe in that so much, and at the same time I can already anticipate reactions to that, which is going to be people being like, are you trying to say that like it's impossible for us to like live amongst non-Muslims and for them to relate to us, and how are we supposed to do da'wah if we make it seem like we're completely different? And like, you know, but the point is not that like this clash of civilizations rhetoric where we're like completely distinct and distant from each other. It's that Islam is universal, like Hollywood degeneracy is not. So instead of subsuming Muslims into Hollywood, like we can just like, you know, we can promote, you know, like we can, I don't know, that whole like humanity before religion stuff, like that's cute, but like really, like, that, why is that cute? Because, like, Islam is for all of humanity, you know, like, I think that's the source of our universalism. That's the source of, like, what makes it possible for us to, like, live with non-Muslims and have non-Muslim friends and relate to them about, like really valuable things too, not just, like, have superficial relationships with them. But it's because, like, we have a universal fitrah, because we're all created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yeah, I don't think that, like, the point here is to dismiss universal values or even to dismiss, like, diversity and representation, but just, like, the intentions behind it, the goals of it, the outcomes. And also, one thing I do think is, like, I think a lot of it is just, like, really ridiculous expectations from, you know, Muslims that, like, why do you expect Hollywood to depict you in a certain light? Like, I don't meet a convicted murderer and act surprised when he's not that nice. I'm like, this dude is a murderer. Like, of course he's not going to be that nice. But, like, we see Hollywood, we see, like, the people producing it who are literally, like, racist pedophiles, and we're like, why did they depict the Muslim as a terrorist? What did you expect him to do? Like, why do you expect anything different? Why do you think you're gonna change that person? Like, it's not, and again, it's not one person, it's a whole industry, and you are upset. And, like, I'm not disappointed by, like, degenerate people being degenerate. I'm like, that's exactly what I expect them to do. So, like, that's the thing, if you don't have that expectation in the first place, you're not going to be disappointed. And also, I think it'll motivate people to, engage in the creative production themselves, instead of constantly being like, why doesn't Hollywood do this for us? Why doesn't the state do this for us? It's like, you expect good things out of the American state and out of Hollywood. Like,
well said.
Bro, this is, no, literally, it is, like, it's so much complaining about, like, what other people, how they depict us, how they promote us, what they do for us. And again, like, I do think it is the same attitude towards the state and, like, this underlying statism, a whole other conversation. But yeah, like, you wouldn't, and that's the thing is, again, I value, like, racial diversity in films and stuff. I don't attach, like, so much importance to it to the point where I would, like, make it my life's work, or, like, say that, like, oh my god, it was so difficult for me growing up to, like, not see myself and stuff. Like, it really wasn't. Like, it wasn't that difficult. Yeah, no, like, I was fine. Like, I don't know. I read the, like, stories of the Prophet. I watched Muhammad the Last Prophet. I watched, like, Lion of Ain Jalut and all those things. Yeah. That was fantastic. I also enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. Like, it wasn't, you know, I hated, of course, like, Islamophobic depictions in Hollywood films, but it wasn't this, like, existential, like, oh my god, like, if only there was, like,
are Muslims real? Do they exist? I've never seen them on TV.
No, and that's the thing is, like, the way people talk about it, it just seems so dramatic. And, like, I know I'm not trying to be mean. I understand that this is also a bigger deal for younger folks, right? Like, of course, younger, like, kids want to see themselves, and but I expect it from younger kids, not from adults. And I feel mean saying it, but I do think it's extremely immature to, like, obsess over the stuff and, like, make it so emotional for yourself. Like, maybe I am being mean, and if I am, then people can say that, but, like,
no, I think there's a balance, you know, like you're saying. There's, of course, a natural human desire to just want to, I don't know, see things that look like yourself for your own, confidence in your identity. Because, of course, you know, it would be great if all of us have strong enough taqwa that we don't need any kind of external validation or encouragement. But obviously, that's incredibly hard, and it's not something that you by default have. If anyone has it, the point is you work towards it. So definitely, you know, in that transition period, of course, it's natural to kind of want to see you know, yourself being accepted, so you don't have to fight internally to tell yourself it doesn't matter if I'm accepted or not. But sure,
there isn't a Muslim community around you. I think that makes it a lot harder, you know, to feel at like, there are other Muslims around.
Yeah, at the very least, we can set a higher aspiration. Like, the goal should be to, like, overcome, you know, kind of like baser desires for, like, belonging and representation, and reach that point, which, yes, of course, it's difficult, and like, it requires, like, a degree of, like, maturity and taqwa, and, like, it helps so much to have a supportive, like, Muslim family and a supportive community. But that should be the goal, not just representation in Hollywood. Like, that is not the, like, that's not the ceiling, you know?
Yes. It's actually, like, this thing, it's a higher, not just kind of spiritual state, but as a person, you're stronger when you don't need that representation. When you can be confident in your Islamic identity or whatever identity, regardless of people around you. That's actually a state that we should all aspire to, regardless of religion, because that's what really empowers us to be ourselves, not wait for ourselves to be recognized as, you exist, and so we depict you on television, decision, and now you can also feel confident in the fact that you are, this category of person. We do need to transcend that. But I think in terms of just countering people, what expected reactions from people in regards to this, I can imagine that the other thing people would say, particularly in regards to like the issue of Muslim representation in these things, is that, okay, but these are some people's experiences. Like, you're talking about, people, Muslims not being presented as like amazing, ideal angels. Well, that's actually what some people are like. And, that's 100% true. It's not trying to generalize that those people's experiences are invalid, or that we should only have the ideal Muslim experience out there and that's the only one worthy of recognition. It's not what I'm saying. But I think we do have to recognize, as we've said throughout this whole conversation, media influences people. Life imitates art. And we have to be conscious of, okay, if we're putting this out there, are we excusing it? Is somebody going to watch this and feel like, oh, okay, so it's not that bad, other people do it too? Are we normalizing it? Or are we showing that, okay, this is a reality, but then here's how to deal with it. Here's the ideal situation. Do we see character growth, for example? Do we see the character even trying to go? Is there a lesson underneath it all? Or is it just, look, this is what, Muslims are like in the 21st century in the West. And, they're partying or they're doing this and they're doing that, even though Islam apparently doesn't allow it. But, it's chill because that's just the way some people are. No, I don't think we can just settle and just sit down at that point, because you've got younger people who are watching that, who are looking for validation, as clearly, the point is that through all of these experiences, you don't want to validate that for them. As Muslims, we shouldn't want to.
Yeah, I don't think that conversation will ever end in a compromise, because I think there's always going to be that underlying, even people who would consider themselves practical Muslims hate feeling shamed for being prudish. And so the gymnastics that people went through to justify Rami and to try to praise something in it was I was there's not a single thread of logic, first of all, in this essay that you're writing, but also what if you just said I'm against these things and yeah, call me a prude for it. I don't think it's okay. I don't think it's beneficial. I don't care if people are like this in real life. There are still Muslims who are so they don't want to feel that sense of shame. They don't want to be told that they're prudish for being against these things. And I don't think that we're ever, and honestly I do think that there is scope to depict less than perfect Muslims without depicting outright haram scenes. I think that's so possible. You can, yeah, person struggles with XYZ. I don't have to see it. I don't have to see the scene of them but that's the thing is some of these depictions are it's purely that, and that's what the selling point of the show is. And people are still trying to justify it. It's not about, again, and yeah, of course I want idealistic representations in media. Why do I want to just see degeneracy and only see horrific things and be this is real life? I know that's real life.
I hate real life.
Yeah, real life sucks.
Give me the good stuff, man.
No, but honestly, that's the thing is sure, fine, it depicts reality, but is there any benefit to the this depiction of reality? Do you depict how to improve, or what the benefit is? What do they learn? How do they develop? Mm-hmm. Or do you can also depict no improvement, but I'll use that there are movies that don't end well, and the person stays a bad person the whole time, and that's the moral of the story, is depicting a certain form of evil and highlighting a certain form of evil. But I don't think that some of these depictions achieve any of that. It's literally just sexualized shock value, and I don't know why people can't but they have to attach some benefit, some meaning to it. Anything that a Muslim does, a Muslim starts a fast fashion brand, it has to be some valuable Muslim thing that we have to praise and whatever. It's what if it just sucks? What if I don't like it? What if the style is bad? What if the materials are cheap? I can't criticize it just because a Muslim made it. This is stuff that I don't know.
That's true. That's why I don't read Muslim fiction, because I know most of the time I'm not going to like it. So I just stay away from it because,
Yeah. But at the same time, I think that from my very, very limited experience of what I've seen with it, I've seen that there are some people trying to reimagine Islamic fiction to more accurately represent, I think some of the, not represent is the wrong word, clearly used in this conversation, but to depict the realities that we've been talking about, to try and imagine situations where it's not constantly a question of your faith being compromised. Actually, we can write a Muslim sci-fi novel and the actual storyline has got nothing to do with whether that person is wearing hijab or how do they feel about their faith or what's their relationship with their parents like. But there's another completely different storyline, but they happen to be Muslim. And so they happen to invoke God. They happen to pray. They happen to think about things from an ethical perspective. And I think that really for Muslims, I guess, coming to the end of our conversation now, if we want to, inshallah, look at alternative forms of media, if we're saying that these are all the problems with some forms of media, but that it is something really important, we do need to be creative in this regard and start trying to imagine how can we integrate Islam without it being just a conversation about being a Muslim in a non-Muslim society or in a new un-Islamic situation. Like, how is it to just actually represent the experiences that we all have on a day-to-day life? Most of my life, I'm not thinking, and I'm sure this is a privilege that I have, but I'm not thinking about how I am seen versus non-Muslims for most of my life. Most of my life, I'm seeing my family, I'm seeing my friends, I'm doing my studies, I'm reading, I'm having fun, whatever it is. Let's write stories about those things, not stories about just being seen by the gaze of the other, as it were.
So, whilst we are waiting for the Muslims to kind of step up and write their own, sci-fi novels and make their own productions, what we can do, I think, is look at what we already have, be critical of it, and kind of put like a Muslim spin on it. Because, my nephew's in nursery, and he's very much into reading right now. So we read Jack and the Beanstalk recently, and much like, maybe because my sister-in-law has such brilliant, bringing up really well, he noticed that Jack is actually the bad guy because he stole. He's like, that's so good. I'm like, that is so true. And, he can pick out these little, things, like not lying and not stuff like that in stories like that. And I think how we go about things, we can put that little, Muslim twist on it. And I think that's a really good way to look at, anime. And I want to come out officially as an anime fan here. I'm sorry to all my fans here, but some of the most wholesome and meaningful content I've seen is through anime. And I'm talking about clean content, but also super reflective, good moral codes and messages, and also things like short episodes and consistency. What more do you want from a show? And okay, I feel like still a weeb right now, but it has so many good moral messages and dilemmas as well. So, it's not like a cartoon that people love to say. If I just, mention, a few off the top of my head, one of the first ones people will watch in their life probably is Death Note. And that is, basically it's a guy who has the ability to kill bad people and stop crime and violence. But does he should he be killing people? And that's, it's a deep thing. And the whole thing is, kind of researching and, unpacking the morality behind that. And, we have things like Attack on Titan, where you look at the inner demon and violence, and there's a really, really ridiculous show called One Punch Man, where he's like a superhero and he's saving lives, but he finds out that, it's not actually glorious, and it's not, and I'm just like, this is life, and this is so much to learn from this. And, people like to lump it in with things like, SpongeBob, but, SpongeBob does not have that depth, and leave you kind of existential turmoil. And there's a Japanese Muslim scholar, Dr. Yamamoto, where he's been looking at anime from a very Sufi-esque lens and drawing lessons on things like fatwa and, just strong moral codes. And he said something that was just so brilliant, because I'm like, yeah, this is what we have to do. And he said Japan may not have a centuries-old Islamic intellectual tradition or a very huge Muslim community either, but he believes that it's possible for us to kind of approach the Islamic culture through learning vocabularies of, Japanese traditions and, anime. And, we can here now use media as a force of good. We can look at it and find where does it kind of correlate with Islam and our etiquettes and our teachings. And they have, in anime especially, they have this brilliant culture of appreciating teachers and sensei culture. Much like we have that in our tradition. We have such a reverence for our scholars and our teachers. And they have this thing where they pass things down to generations, and all of the traditions, all of that. It's not, we have that. I just think about but they have this kind of they have these moral codes and these things of respect for the elders and for your friends, and all of this is something that we can kind of look for. They're not going to put it out, it's not targeted for Muslims, but we can find it very easily. And that's why I feel much more comfortable letting my nephew and watch anime rather than things like Captain America, which is so much agenda and propaganda. And apart from that kind of part, anime has short episodes and it has lots of episodes, right? So it kind of takes into account, you never have that feeling of, my show's ending, and you're never wasting so much time binging as well. And I feel like that is very good time management and just very, very compatible with the Muslim lifestyle, in my opinion.
All of Amina's arguments are so holistic. It's not just the content is good, it's the content is good, the time is good, the format is good, everything about it is good.
Praise for it.
It's good for kids, it's good for adults. No, but I completely agree with you. And I have a bone to pick with Muslims who like harp on about anime being degenerate, because first of all, anime, it's just a medium, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, sure. Like, I actually looked up like the technical definition of anime, because like people kept saying that Avatar is not anime, and I was like, what do you mean? It's literally like an animated show. It's in the same style, but turns out anime technically does have to be produced in Japan. So I guess Avatar was originally produced like in English and everything.
In the States, yeah.
Regardless, even though, yeah, like anime comes out of like specific cinema and everything, there's a huge range of what you can do with a medium, right? So yeah, you're gonna have weird stuff, but also you're just gonna have like really amazing shows. And the great thing about animation is that like, one, you kind of like, obviously you're not technically looking at people's auras, right? And also a lot of times like these shows do depict like, they're not about like super adult themes. Like a lot of times the main characters are kids, like Hunter x Hunter. It's about like the main characters are very young. Also, it depicts like a friendship between two boys. And a great thing about like anime, also like Korean shows do this, is that like they depict like men and boys being like soft, wholesome people, and they're able to depict them as heroes without them being like gruff and like rude and annoying and frustrating, which like you never see. I feel like you don't see that in American cinema. In Hunter x Hunter, like the main kid is like, he's literally an angel. And also it like, okay, Demon Slayer, which I just got Aisha to watch, but like the main guy, like that's like one of the things that stands out about his character is he's just like endlessly nice, and like that's the good, like they celebrate the, like just that wholesomeness, and it's just about like, yeah, it's about like wholesome friendships and everything. But yeah, like you can do so much with the medium too, because like it's drawn, right? Like you can like depict the most like beautiful nature scenes. You can also like have so much like fun with the costumes and like the characters and everything. But yeah, I do think that also like they just have like a lot of like good moral lessons. Like, okay, Demon Slayer, which is now people are talking about a lot, because yeah, so far only one season is out, and also the movie has been out in theaters for a while, but it like, I don't know, I feel like it gathers so much of what's good in anime. It has like what like I think kids like, which is that, you know, I don't know how to describe it, but like the way that the martial arts are depicted, where there's like certain like forms and styles, and like he's like a water Hashira and like fire Hashira, and like these things where it's like, you know, these different like themes, and like you can be like, oh, I'm one of these, but it also has like gruesome violence, which like the thing is, when you depict it artfully like that, it's just like, I think it's cool. Like it like it just it look, that's thing, like the way that you're able to like evoke emotion using something that is drawn, that typically like here we think of like cartoons as just like something like really, you know, infantilized, it's just for kids, but like a lot of anime is like extremely emotional. It's extremely like they depict trauma, and they depict it in a way where it's not just like, you know, let's like spray blood everywhere, but you know, like I don't know, like there's more to it. It is like Demon Slayer is about like his family, right? Like what is the main relationship? It's his brother trying to save his older sister who's like been turned into a demon. Like, guys, you guys need to watch this show. Well, but also on top of that, on top of it being like, yeah, having that kind of like the cool, like the way they organize or like, you know, depict the martial arts, but also great relationships, also dramatic and like low-key gruesome sometimes, and it's also hilarious, like that. Yeah, like, it just exactly. They gather all of that in like these shows. So yeah, I don't that's the thing, is like, why would you get out of anime everything else that you like in like regular cinema, like whether it's like drama or sadness or romance or comedy, minus the like dirty stuff, as long as you're watching like decent anime, right? And on top of that, you get like so much more creativity with the medium. I feel like it's just all around win. So,
it's a win-win,
yeah.
for sure.
Okay. I feel like everyone's going to want to watch at least one anime after hearing both of you guys' case for it. They're strong cases. They are. But should anybody not be inclined to like anime, to watch anime and find meaning in anime, I feel like there are like you're kind of saying, drawing on the same example of what you were quoting of Professor Yamamoto's kind of idea that, you know, we can look in media and bring out things that are related to our values and our ethics and apply them to that. And I think, you know, I know that our friends at Think Bites did a recent article on some of the lessons that they could take from Harry Potter, which I thought was, again, just like a really interesting example of that. And, you know, we've mentioned Lord of the Rings a good few times in this episode so far, but literally it's been something that I've been wanting to do for ages, is to write an analysis of, you know, the different types of leadership that you have, like, you know, and apply that to the different characters in Lord of the Rings, because I think it's really, really interesting. And obviously as Muslims, thinking about kind of, leadership, and when we think about prophetic leadership, and even how the Sahaba afterwards, how they all exemplified a different kind of leadership, and the different kinds of people we need in the world and in the community. I don't know, I just think that it's a very interesting way to just draw something out of that, although that's probably like super niche. But even as well, just looking at things that already have some kind of religious connotation, because I feel like Narnia is really is an interesting example of this, where it's very heavily influenced by Christianity. And actually it's an example of how you could get a story that is not about Christianity at all, but is about Christianity, absolutely, in the same way, has really strong themes, same messages, same symbolism. And I think that even, thinking about that and thinking about some of the messages that are coming out of that and contrasting that with Islam, I always find like that really interesting. But I think it's also a really good example of what, if we allowed ourselves to, we could come up with a Muslim Narnia. As dramatic as that sounds.
That's conclusion. We are producing the Muslim Narnia through the Qarawiyyin project.
Inshallah.
Donate to our GoFundMe. No, but actually, okay, one thing I want to add to that, because like I know we mentioned like Muslim novels and like how they tend to not be amazing. I was like you also, I mean, like I was against reading them. I read a couple which were like all right, but in terms of like the best, that the most I ever related to a character because of their religiosity in a book or movie was actually Jane Eyre. And because like she, first of all, the story is amazing.
Aisha loves Jane Eyre.
Dude, it's so... Also, wait, hold on. Jane Eyre is better than Pride and Prejudice. Didn't even put that out there.
It was my first love. I literally memorized paragraphs from it. And then I don't know why I did that.
It has like all the like great aspects of a story, but also what's the conclusion? Like, what's her solace? It's God.
Absolutely,
like, so
absolutely.
We cut this question out because I think we're just going way over time anyway. But when one of you asked, like good female role models in like TV and books and media and stuff, literally the first one I thought of was Jane Eyre. Because why does she leave Crazy Man Rochester? Because he's already married, and in Christianity, polygamy's not a thing. So she was like, no. And she's just like, I love you to pieces. I was literally about to go to the altar with you. You make my heart sing, whatever. But she's like, no. I'm a good Christian woman. My love for God is stronger than that. And she literally runs from the only house she knows, goes sleeps in a field, because she's like, I trust in Allah and I know that he's going to be there for me, right? I was just like, at 13, I was just like, oh my God, yes. Well done, girl. Like,
so true.
He's the richest landowner around, and what do? You leave. Well done. That's her strength.
Yes. No, that's the thing. It's like, it's not just like, it wasn't a small sacrifice either. Like first of all, she didn't have much to begin with. And then she had like in front of her, like she could have had like the whole dunya and like, and then she was like, nope, like I'm going to choose God. And then she went. And also like, that's the thing too, is like when she like left that situation, it wasn't like, oh, she actually found another guy and it didn't work out the first one because like another man saved her. Like, no, what the family that takes her in is actually like, it's two sisters, right? Like she, like amazing like female friendships and like supportiveness of like sisterhood. And then also like, I don't know, there's some commentary in there about like why secret marriages are problematic too. Like, it's just a great story overall.
And there's character development and growth, because he then got better and like, he realized he became less proud. He understood why she left him. Also, his crazy wife dies, so like, now they don't have to like divorce or like commit polygamy because she's just like dead.
This is probably one of my least favorite tropes in cinema is love triangle that is solved by death. Like, it's just too convenient.
I just hate love triangles in general.
Yeah.
No, I like that because everyone's happy endings. No one gets hurt
except for the dead person. Anyway, I think we touched a lot of bases in this conversation, alhamdulillah, and this was like, it was relatively lighthearted. Maybe it was just like opportunity for us to like talk about our fandoms, but I hope that we were also able to show how I think that the issue of media and culture is, there's a lot to it, right? Like a lot of these, there's so many debates in it, there's so many like arguments on each sides of each of these debates. I hope we were able to get across that like there's a lot of harm that can come from media and from storytelling, but there's also a lot of benefit and there's a lot of potential in it, and that I hope that like more Muslims feel empowered to express their creativity through storytelling and to see it as like a source of benefit and not just not like purely a source of like idle entertainment or like time wasting or escapism, but that it can be a lot more meaningful than that. So with that, we will finally wrap up. We encourage you all to check out the Qarawiyyin Project website, where we publish articles, and also to check out any other episodes of the Qarawiyyin podcast. Let us know on our social media if you have any thoughts on the episode. Do feel free to join the conversation. And with that, we will go ahead and close. Jazakumullahu khairan for listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.